Podcast.
Welcome to Our Weird World. I'm host John Henson, and today it is Weird Fun Bag number 26. And I'm not gonna lie to you, I know just as much as you do about these stories. I kind of said it last week. Like, I wrote these in a book. I don't even know which book they're in. They're in one of the 100 stories series. I know that. And they're just back there. And I totally forgot. I know one of them's an explorer, one of them's a cult leader, and one of them's a model, because that's what the title of the show says they are. So we're going to go on this journey together with the stories of Edmund Creffield, Audrey Munson, and our first story will be of Robert Bartlett.
Story time. Story time. Story time? Story time.
Robert Bartlett was the first of 10 children born on August 15th, 1875 in Brigus, Newfoundland. His family held a long tradition of working on and around the ocean, because that's what you do in Newfoundland. And by age 17, Bartlett had mastered his first ship and had become obsessed with exploring the Arctic. So in 1898, he teamed up with Robert Peary, who was the first man to actually reach the North Pole. And during their first voyage together, Bartlett was forced to hold Peary down while a doctor amputated 8 of the dude's frostbitten fingers. Again, he's 23. So pretty, and look, and this is late 1800s, early 1900s. There's no technology, and you're just up there in the Arctic with constantly below freezing temperatures with no real effective way of keeping warm. So stuff's gonna happen, and some crazy stuff is gonna happen. And right out of the gate, dude just has 8 frostbitten fingers that need to get amputated, or toes that need to get amputated. And he's just having to hold this dude down while a doctor saws the dude's toes off. And then they go on another voyage together. I'm done after that. You got to saw off 8 of my 10 toes. I don't even know which. Do I just have my big toes left and you just got rid of the 4 little ones? That's probably fine. Those other toes just get in the way. All right. I've broken 3 of my little toes. They're annoying. Keep my big toes and I'll just be like a weird shaped foot guy with just one big toe. You need your big toe for balance. I think the other ones are pretty expendable. Anyway, it's beside the point. They teamed up again on their next voyage, and the ship that they were on, the SS Roosevelt, caught on fire on its way to the North Pole. And though they were able to put out the fire and keep sailing, the boat eventually got stuck in the ice, which happened a lot, probably. And that forced Bartlett to detonate 20 sticks of dynamite to free the ship, except, as you might expect, the explosion ripped a giant hole in the side of the ship because I guess he didn't set the dynamite out far enough away from the ship. But here's the great, dude rips the giant hole in the ship and he just goes out and fixes it, just hops out on the ice and repairs this hole and, prevents the ship from sinking on the spot. It wasn't a great fix because he realized they were not going to make it to the North Pole, and back. So they just decided to turn back to their port. But on the return trip, they hit an iceberg. What is it with ships hitting icebergs? And again, if it's dark and you can't see anything, I get it. The little tiny piece of ice kind of barely floating over, maybe. But hits an iceberg, totally Titanics himself. The iceberg rips the hole back open, floods the hull, and disables the pumps that, normally get the water out. To make things worse, as if they weren't bad already, the ship's rudder constantly broke, and the main mast fell onto the deck, narrowly missing several people that would have otherwise been crushed to death. Things got even worse somehow when the ship ran out of coal to power itself more than 1,000 miles from home, which then forced the crew to burn seal blubber for fuel, which didn't work because, I don't know, I guess fat and coal, I don't know. I don't know how steamships work, you guys. But they didn't work. So they then forced them to break off wood from the hull to put in the furnace. So they're just breaking off parts of the ship that's already damaged and flooded to throw into the furnace to try to power it to get home. Somehow it works, and somehow they get back. In 1910, Harry Whitney and Paul Rainey then asked Bartlett to take them up to the North Pole, or at least up to the Arctic, to hunt and kill as many polar bears and musk oxen as possible. I don't know what a musk ox is. I think it's like a real hairy buffalo. Not a buffalo, but like a big old cow, like a big hairy cow. I think is really the thing there. It's a big hairy cow, but also just a ton of polar bears. And here's the thing, like polar bears, this is probably why polar bears are endangered now. There was probably a bunch of them. And then you just had these dudes who just wanted to go up there and just murk all of them. And so they did. The two men on this single trip, they proceeded to fire 100,000 rounds of ammunition each day at anything that moved, and then just left the carcasses in the snow. It's not like they were using them for pelts or meat or anything. They were just murdering. And like Bartlett, he's just, navigating through. By the end of this trip, these two dudes had killed 59 polar bears and so many walrus and musk oxen that they had actually just lost count. Bartlett, on the other hand, in the midst of all of this shooting, he somehow caught a live 1,200-pound polar bear of his own and trained it to tow the ship back through the ice whenever they got it stuck until it got too tired. Like what? This dude, true hero. Rather than execute the polar bear like Whitney and Rainey probably really wanted to do, Bartlett then lured the bear into the ship's hold and threw 18 pounds of chloroform on it to knock it out. Because you had to. The bear, which he then named Silver King, would actually live for another 20 years. He had also, on this trip, captured 2 baby polar bears, 2 baby walruses, and 6 baby musk oxen for the return trip back. I guess he's just building his own little Noah's Ark for his own amusement, I guess. 4 years later, in 1914, Bartlett was recruited to be part of the Karluk expedition to the Arctic. But because the ship that they were on was in no condition to navigate icy waters, it quickly got stuck, forcing Bartlett to unload most of their supplies so that the food would have enough, or so that the crew would have enough food once the ship inevitably began to sink. It also didn't help that the ship's captain, Vilhjalmur Stephenson, just walked off the ship and just out into the icy void and just never came back. Bartlett, after this happened, quickly took over as the new leader of the group and organized the crew into 2 different parties to go off and find food. However, because most of this crew was just entirely too inexperienced to be on an expedition like this, most of them had a hard time finding food. One of the groups never returned, and their frozen corpses were found a decade later. Bartlett's party, though, actually walked through Siberia over to Alaska, which was 700 miles away, in temperatures as low as negative 50 degrees Fahrenheit, where they finally reached a town that provided Bartlett transportation to another town, which then provided him a usable ship to go back to his expedition and get everybody else. By the time Bartlett reunited with the original crew, they had been stranded for 6 months and 11 of them had already died. Those that were still alive were very malnourished and suffering from nephritis, which is basically just inflammation of the kidneys, probably because they're super dehydrated. By the 1920s, they all get back, though. Bartlett survives again, gets back. By the 1920s, though, he was struggling with alcoholism, mostly because no one wanted to fund any more Arctic expeditions. And I don't even know why you would want to go back. Nothing about your trips to the Arctic have been remotely successful. Pick another hobby. Like, pick another career. Like, just go be a fisherman and doing whatever people in Newfoundland do. Like, don't go back. But he's all depressed and just drinking himself to death because no one wants to go back to the Arctic. It's too dangerous. So in 1924, Bartlett was crossing 44th Street in New York when he was hit by a laundry truck. The accident broke his leg and several ribs and was so bad that local papers actually proactively printed his obituary, assuming that he would end up dying from his injuries. But no. If we've learned anything about this dude, he's pretty hardy. All right. Instead, he spent 3 months in the hospital, made a full recovery. And then once he got out, he actually gave up drinking and got his own boat that he could take back to the Arctic for another expedition. In between expeditions in 1930, director Varick Frissell actually approached Bartlett about acting in a movie in which an enterprising young man joined a seal hunt. Frissell wanted this movie to be shot on an actual voyage and on location, which wasn't even remotely close to normal movie making procedures at the time. And for an Arctic themed movie, it still isn't. People aren't going on location to be shooting movies in the Arctic. They're going to be at a studio and doing all that. But it's 1930. Anything's possible. So Bartlett, he agrees to just be the lead actor in this movie now that he's never done before. He's never been an actor before. Or not the lead actor, but he agreed to play the role of the ship's captain, fitting. And then he sets out for the voyage. During the trip, the one part of the movie's script actually called for the crew to survive a shipwreck, which originally was planned to be faked and carefully crafted with Hollywood magic and post-production editing. However, the ship ended up crashing for real. And the crew, everybody still survived. But, Bartlett, going to make it as realistic as he could. After filming the movie, Frissell then made another voyage with Bartlett to grab some extra B-roll. And along the way, his ship exploded thanks to the ice-breaking blasting powder catching fire. The explosion on this ship killed 28 people, including Frissell. And despite all that, though, the movie was still completed and released in 1931. It's called The Viking. You can actually watch it today. I think there's a free version on YouTube that you can watch. And at least as of right now, as far as I know, it is still technically known as the deadliest movie ever produced because so many people died while filming it. For the next 15 years, Bartlett continued sailing up and around the Arctic before eventually dying of pneumonia in New York at age 70. Moving on now to Franz Edmund Creffield, who was born in Germany in 1870, but eventually immigrated to the United States and worked his way west until he appeared in Portland, Oregon in 1903. He first got involved with the Salvation Army and even went on a mission for them to the town of Corvallis, Oregon. And soon after his mission, Creffield left the Salvation Army and formed his own group, which he called the Bride of Christ Church. Now, we've seen this before, where the early days of the Salvation Army kind of got some people like the wrong idea. Like we saw it with the aggressive Christianity Mission Training Corps, whatever. I'm pretty sure Yahweh Ben Yahweh from episode 100 was involved in the Salvation Army at some point. And now you got Creffield, who is taking this concept of, probably aggressive Christianity and creates his own Bride of Christ Church in Corvallis. The residents of Corvallis were immediately skeptical of Creffield and his group, labeling them immediately as a cult and calling them the Holy Rollers, mostly because the group rolled on the floor for hours during their worship service. Great name. Despite the criticism, despite the skepticism, all that, Creffield's followers really believed that he was constantly receiving messages from God and listened to him preach for hours on end. When the group's services began consistently lasting past midnight and violating the town's noise ordinances, the town actually barred them from holding services inside Corvallis city limits. So, rather than disband and give up, that summer, Creffield and roughly 25 followers moved into one of the cult members' homes on the outskirts of town. By October, the group had burned most of the home's furniture and utensils. I don't know why. They also burned the owner's dog and cat, all as part of their worship services. I don't know. Creffield's just up there. Oh, yes, The Lord has taught me we must burn everything. Burn the couches and the chairs. Burn the puppy and the kitty. It is all for Jesus. Jesus does everything that I am saying. So through my mind, you get it. I don't. Stuff. In 1904, I don't know what I'm saying. In 1904, 20 vigilantes called the Whitecaps had finally had enough of Creffield's shenanigans and actually tarred and feathered him. The next day, Creffield then married Maud Hurt, which was the daughter of the woman who they had all moved into and burned down her home. And he got married. A report of this wedding said he got married in a room, quote, where the odor of pine tar was noticeable. Whatever that means, but like also, like he was probably still just tarred and feathered from the day before and still went through with the wedding. A month later, Creffield was accused of having an affair with Maud's aunt, Donna Starr, which is problematic for a lot of reasons. I mean, they were probably cool with it in the cult because, of course, they would be. But adultery was illegal at the time in Oregon, which is a crazy sentence to say because, like, Oregon, at least Portland, super liberal place, you would think maybe that's, you know, they would have always been that way, but I guess not. Word got out about this, and Oregon authorities then went on a statewide manhunt for Creffield. And while he was on the run, his followers spent days fasting and lying flat on the floor, praying for him to not get caught. Most of them ended up getting committed to the Oregon State Insane Asylum, as they should. If you're going to a church and part of your worship services involve you rolling around on the floor for a lot of the time, I don't know, man. Seems a little suspicious, all right? And I know, like, the Pentecostals, they bump right on up to the line on this. I remember, because, like, my dad was, or still is, a keyboard player in a gospel group. And so, like, most weekends, like Saturday nights or maybe Sunday morning, Sunday night or whatever, they would just go to different churches around the state. And a couple times I would go with him, and sometimes we would go to this Pentecostal church, a couple Pentecostal churches, different ones. And I remember, like, as they're up there singing, they're doing their concert, there would just be points during this show, I guess, where people would just lose their minds. And they would just be screaming, running up and down the aisles, and just, like, falling out in the back. I remember I was sitting on the front row of one show. They're up on the stage singing. I'm laying down in the pew because I'm tired. And all of a sudden, this woman just starts running up and down. And then there was like me in the front row, and then this bench, this cushioned bench, and then the stage. And she just runs back and forth for a couple times, and then just like falls, like ragdolls herself onto this bench in front of me. And then she just lays there motionless for like 3 more songs. And then she just got up and walked back to her seat. It was so weird. And no one thought it was weird at all. No, everybody just kept going. And I don't know, man. That's real weird. It's real weird behavior to be doing all that. Anyway, where are we at? I don't even know. Shortly after Sarah Hurt, who was Creffield's mother-in-law, after she was committed to an asylum, Creffield was actually found naked and starving beneath her house. So he was finally arrested. He was found guilty of adultery and served 17 months in prison. Following his release, he claimed that he was Jesus and that his resurrection was his release from prison. That's not how that works. But he also then began claiming that he had been responsible for the recent San Francisco earthquake that had killed more than 3,000 people and destroyed 80% of the city. All of his followers, who by then had been released from their asylums, totally believed him, because of course they would, and also believed that he would cause an earthquake in Corvallis as punishment for the city being so mean to all of them and locking them away in mental institutions. In April of that year, Creffield led his followers to Newport, Oregon, to find a new place to live. Lewis Hartley, a wealthy mine owner whose family had chosen to follow Creffield, actually attempted to shoot him 4 times with a revolver, However, Hartfield had placed the wrong cartridges in the gun and the assassination attempt failed. Creffield quickly fled to Seattle with Maud, who he's still married to Maud, I guess, even though he banged her aunt probably because she wanted him to. I don't know, man. Anyway, he flees with Maud to Seattle, where he was chased down and actually killed by George Mitchell, who was Donna Starr's brother. So like his uncle-in-law. It's going to get confusing, so just bear with me. George Mitchell kills Edmund Creffield. Then his 16-year-old sister, Esther, she had actually been chosen by Creffield to be the new Mary, who would give birth to the new Jesus that Creffield would ostensibly be the father of or something. I don't know. And so because everyone knew how insane Creffield and the Brides of Christ cult was, Mitchell was actually found not guilty of the murder by reason of his own insanity, and was released. However, 2 days later, Esther, his sister, shot and killed him using a gun that Maud, Creffield's widow, had purchased using the fees they'd earned as witnesses in the trial. Okay, so let's review all of that, all right? Because I know it got confusing. Edmund Creffield married Maud Hurt, had an affair with her aunt, and was later murdered by his mistress's brother because his 16-year-old sister had been chosen by Creffield to give birth to Creffield's Jesus child. Something like that. That brother was then murdered by his sister using Creffield's wife's gun. I think we're good, right? It's probably still very confusing. Just believe me on it. Even more, Maud eventually committed suicide while Esther was found not guilty of murdering her brother, also by reason of insanity, and was committed to Western State Hospital in Steilacoom, Washington. She was released in 1909 and thankfully killed herself in 1914. And here's the thing. I'm sure a lot of you probably didn't like that I just said that. All right. A lot of you probably, it's not PC to wish people would kill themselves. I think there are exceptions. All right. Not everything has to be black and white. I think if you're in a cult, like for example, we talked about the foundation last week. Some of those people who were in the foundation and then left after that cult disbanded and went and joined Jim Jones's People's Temple, and then they died at Jonestown, 100% deserved it. Do not feel bad about that at all. Some people are, you just cull the population just a little bit. All right. You just, here's the thing. COVID, millions of people died. Not everyone that died probably deserved to die, but there's a pretty healthy percentage of that group that absolutely deserved it, and I don't feel bad that they died, So all of that is to say, the people involved in this cult who killed themselves, chef's kiss. Totally should have done it. Anyway, our final story here. Audrey Munson, who was born on June 8th, 1891 in Rochester, New York. At age 17, she then moved to the Washington Heights neighborhood in New York City to pursue a career as an actress after a fortune teller told her that she would, quote, be beloved and famous. And if you're taking life advice from a fortune teller, you deserve whatever happens to you. Because here's the thing, it's not going to be good, right? And we'll see. So she soon landed a role on Broadway in The Boy and the Girl and actually had appearances in 3 other plays. The fortune teller, in addition to saying that she would be beloved and famous, the fortune teller also told her that, quote, when you think that happiness is yours, its Dead Sea fruit shall turn to ashes in your mouth. And here's the thing. She still went to New York with that crazy cryptic thing that just got said to her. Cool. When you think you finally reached happiness, everything's going to get taken away from you. And you're still going to just go to the big city and chase your dreams? You're an idiot. You're so dumb. Anyway, one day, while window shopping along Fifth Avenue, photographer Felix Herzog saw her and actually asked her to pose for him at his studio. Herzog then introduced her to several of his painter and sculptor friends who actually considered her, quote, the world's most perfectly formed woman, and opened her up to the world of nude modeling. Soon, she was posing for some of the most, apparently, well-known sculptors, painters, and photographers, such as Francis Coates Jones, Charles Dana Gibson, Arnold, Ginty. I'm sure these names mean something to somebody. I have no idea who they are. Anyway, for the next decade, Munson was the model of choice for sculptors who used her body as inspiration for several statues and monuments that were later erected at various state capitals and public buildings around the world. She then used the fame that she had garnered as a nude statue model to launch a film career, starring in 4 silent films that were huge box office successes, mostly because she was naked. And get it, like, oh, you're going to tell me the world's most perfectly formed woman's going to be naked in a movie? Who's not going to go see that? Especially like in the 19 whatever we are, like 1910s, when, oh, we can go see a totally naked woman and not our wives who are always clothed and in the dark and always getting pregnant. Anyway, oh man, I can't, like, of course that got so popular. I can't imagine how lame and frustrating sex must have been for everybody involved back then. Anyway, in 1919, Munson met Dr. Walter Wilkins while she was living with her mother at a boarding house in Manhattan. Wilkins immediately fell in love with Munson, which was a little problematic because Wilkins was already married. But on February 27th, Wilkins fixed that problem by murdering his wife in order to marry Munson, and then the two ran off together before police eventually tracked them down in Canada following a nationwide manhunt. Wilkins was eventually tried, convicted, and sentenced to death, but actually hanged himself in his cell before he could be fried in the electric chair. Now, possibly due to the media frenzy that resulted from the Wilkins case, or because of the cryptic prediction that the fortune teller said, Munson suffered a mental breakdown and actually struggled to find new modeling work after that. By 1920, she was living in Syracuse and was supported by her mother, who was working as a door-to-door salesman. That's crazy. All the modeling and film work that she did, and then she doesn't have any money. She even began claiming to be a European aristocrat named Baroness Audrey Mary Munson. She wasn't. In January of 1921, a series of 20 articles appeared in Hearst's Sunday magazine written by Munson with various stories from her career and warnings to other models. In response, producer Alan Rock actually took out ads in that magazine claiming that he had paid Munson $27,500 to star in the film Headless Moths. Munson, who was surprised by all of this, claimed that the payment was just a publicity stunt and that she hadn't been paid at all. And so after filing lawsuits against Alan Rock, it was revealed that the articles that had appeared in her Sunday magazine had been ghostwritten by someone else, and Munson hadn't really had anything to do with it. Later that year, she launched a campaign with United Press to find the perfect man to marry, but canceled the search a couple of months later, claiming she never wanted to get married in the first place, and also probably because she got a ton of submissions from some real creepy dudes. On October 3rd, she was arrested in St. Louis, Missouri on morals charges because people didn't like her posing nude in the movies. And it's the Midwest. Ugh, nudity. Ugh. Although she was acquitted and continued to publicly recreate nude poses from other famous paintings, she continued to struggle to find sustained work. After a failed suicide attempt in 1922, she then petitioned the House of Representatives to pass a law protecting her from the Jews because obviously they were behind all of this. And she's also crazy. 9 years later, in 1931, her mother had finally had enough of her daughter's insanity and petitioned to have her committed to a mental asylum. And so on her 40th birthday, she was ordered by a judge to be admitted to a psychiatric facility for treatment. And for the next 65 years, this woman stayed at the St. Lawrence State Hospital for the Insane in Ogdensburg, New York, where she was treated for depression and schizophrenia until she died in 1996 at the age of 104. During her stay at the hospital, Munson worked to maintain her youthfulness and beauty by constantly consuming milk, yogurt, and urine for some reason. After her mother died in 1958, Munson went 25 years in this hospital without having a single visitor until her half-niece, Darlene Bradley, rediscovered her story and began visiting her. Although Munson's life and career were largely forgotten, there's a good chance you've actually seen her naked as the woman depicted in a variety of sculptures. Here's just a handful that are a little bit more prominent. She was the model for the statue Venus, which is on display in the library of the Biltmore Estate in Asheville, North Carolina. She was Peace in front of the Appellate Courthouse on 25th Street in Manhattan. She was Pomona as part of the Pulitzer Fountain at the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. She is Wisconsin, the golden statue at the top of the Wisconsin Capitol Dome. I've actually been there. I've seen it. Didn't realize that was her. She was Ceres, goddess of agriculture, which was the statue at the top of the Missouri Capitol Dome. She was the Triumph of Peace, which was a monument at Piedmont Park in Atlanta. And she was Florida's tribute to the women of the Confederacy, which is a monument at Confederate Park in Jacksonville, Florida. There we go. Weird fun bag number 26 in the books. Those were good. I forgot how good they were. Good job, me, for putting a good episode together. So let's recap these three and see what we learned today.
What did we learn?
Number one, Robert Bartlett, famous explorer of the Arctic. He just captured a polar bear and just trained it to be his pet, all on his own. He also had his other polar bears and walruses and musk oxen that he just somehow grabbed them without him getting shot, because apparently the two dudes he was with were shooting everything else. Number two, Edmund Creffield formed the Brides of Christ cult, then got some weird family drama involved. Everybody's shooting each other. Everybody's killing each other in Oregon. Is a big, convoluted, silly mess. And then number three, Audrey Munson, supermodel, super naked, super forgotten. Crazy that this woman who, if you've seen just a statue of a naked woman, it's probably based on her body, and spent 65 years in a mental hospital because she went insane and died at 104. And just a crazy story of someone that you probably didn't realize you've seen before.
What did we learn?
Next week on Our Weird World, we are looking at the story of Christian Gerhard Strider. Who was he? He's a con man, and he did a lot of stuff. Got really far and really deep into a lot of things, and then it all unraveled, as it normally does for these con artists. But we will look at his story, really interesting, next week. So come on back for that. Thank you so much for continuing to listen. Keep telling all your friends about the show. Keep it weird.
This is a podcast